All right, so today's lesson is going to be polynomial basics. Some of these terms you know, some of these terms you may not know, and it's okay. But they're all very important vocabulary words, okay? So, a lot of writing, a lot of just basic kind of stuff today. So, an expression, that is a mathematical statement that has a minimum. So, what I write, you write. Minimum of two terms containing numbers, variables, or both. So some examples would be if I said 4x squared plus 7. That's an expression because it has a minimum of two terms. So you have one term, two terms. So this one has variables, this one doesn't. It is what it is. All right, you can have more than two terms. So I might say 8x to the third plus 5x squared minus 7x. That's another expression. It has more than two terms. All right, so a term. A term is the value on which the mathematical operations take place. Basically, that's a really fancy way of saying it's the things that are getting added and subtracted. So, for this top one, you've got 1, 2, 3 terms. 5x squared is a term, a positive 8x is a term, and minus 7, so like a negative 7, that's another term. So I want you to look at this example. And in your brain, I want you to figure out how many terms are out there real quick. All right, so how many terms does this one have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the little piece that's getting added and subtracted together, those are your terms. So then a polynomial is an expression consisting of variables and coefficients and involves only the operations of addition, subtraction, and multiplication for us. So each of these things that we've written already, those are polynomials. Poly, if you remember back when you were learning subfixes or what's that called? Subfixes, yeah. In middle school, poly means many. So simply that means many terms. So let's make one up. 8x squared minus 4x plus 3. That's a polynomial. Anybody know what I could call that since it has 3 terms? Trinomial. Okay, very good. That's one thing that we're going to be doing today is you're going to be classifying by how many terms they have and the degree. All right, so that's a trinomial. So we have some special names, and then sometimes you just have too many of those, and you just call it a polynomial. So let's go 12x to the 5th plus 3x to the 4th minus 7x to the 3rd plus 8x squared. Now, technically, I could have told you to just make one up. And as long as you had terms added, subtracted together, you got a polynomial. But there are some special names that we just mentioned we use. How many terms does a monomial have? Mono is 1. So one term might be 7x to the 4th. That's one term. Technically, if you just put 9, that's a monomial. It's just one term. Okay? What's a binomial going to have? It's going to have 2 terms. So that means I've got 2 things added together. So let's just go with 10x to the 3rd plus 7x. It doesn't matter what numbers I'm using. What matters is that I only have 2 of the terms. Okay, so that was a monomial. That's a separate monomial. And then trinomial is 3. So if I said 5x squared, I could say minus 8x minus 11. That is a trinomial because it's 3. Now, what's a coefficient? Where do you find a coefficient? It's the number in front of the variable. That's exactly right. So it's a number multiplied by a variable. So in this expression that I typed right here, 5x squared plus 8x minus 7. I see 3 numbers, but I actually only have 2 coefficients. What are my 2 coefficients? Very good. So the 5 is a coefficient because it's in front of a variable. The 8 is a coefficient because it's in front of a variable. Why didn't you include the minus 7? Very good. It's a constant. It's not in front of a variable. Okay? So coefficients are in front of the variable. So if you were talking to probably somebody, maybe if you got a younger sibling in middle school, 6th grade, they're really just starting to learn variables and all this stuff. How would you describe what a variable is to somebody younger than you? It's a letter. It's a letter that's going to represent something you don't know, some unknown quantity, unknown number. So in this expression, what's your variable? X. So your x squared and your x. That's your x is your variable. Now x is being squared, so what do you call when you have a little number up here like this 2 or that 3? That's your exponent. It tells you how many times that would get multiplied. And I don't know if we talked about it on here, I can't remember, but x squared and x are not the same. They're not like terms. All right, so a constant term is a term with a fixed value. If something is constant, it is always the same. It never changes. So a variable could make you multiply by a number. It could change, but a constant is the number that's by itself. So in our example, what's our constant?
7.
Very good. So it's that -7 right there. Nothing you do, no number that you make that x is going to change the 7. It is what it is. All right, so then you got the word factors. So factors are numbers and or variables that are multiplied to make a product or term. So multiplied. All right, so when we're looking at this example, so factors are pretty easy because when we say factor, because we've had algebra, we think of factors like this, where you had to factor it out. These are factors because x plus 4 times x plus 8. Those two things are getting multiplied together. But also right here, these factors, this is really 5 times x squared. So those are factors. What is 8x really telling us? 8 times x. So 8 times x, those are considered factors when we were talking about it's anything multiplied together. All right, so standard form. Do you remember anything about standard form? Standard form is when you write the polynomial in descending order of exponents. Descending order of exponents. Yes, that is exactly what it is. What does it mean to descend? You go down. So you start from the highest, you go to the lowest. Like if you're talking about a mountain, you ascend, you're going up. You descend, you're coming down. So I want you to write yourself a note. Highest to lowest. So I'm going to write down a polynomial that may or may not be in the right order. It's not going to be in the right order. And you're going to put it in order. So if I give you 3 plus 4x squared minus 8x minus 7x to the third. That is not in standard form. Why is that not in standard form? It starts with the lowest value. Your exponents are not in order. So I want you to put the terms, put your exponents in order from highest to lowest. All right, so I asked you to put it in order in standard form. Now, don't look at the coefficients. Your coefficients are 3, or 3 is not a coefficient. What's 3? It's a constant because it doesn't have a variable. It's 4, -8, -7, but I'm not looking at the coefficients. I'm looking at the exponents. My exponents are x squared, x, and x to the third. Which of those is the highest power? X to the third. I'm about to do something. See if you catch what I did wrong. I've got to take the negative. That's not just some random symbol that's there for fun. It's negative 7x to the third, okay? So if I already put that in order, I like to think logically. If I was at x to the third and I'm going to go down, what's down from x to the third? X to the second. If I got it, I write it. If I don't, I keep going. So I do have an x to the second. So what kind of 4 is that?
Positive.
Positive. If you write a negative, guess what? You're wrong. Okay? Got to have the right thing. All right, from x squared, what goes down from there? X to the first, which is our negative 8x. And then after we run out of variables, we got our poor little old constant right there, plus 3. This is standard form. Now, if we were talking about equivalent, these two things are equivalent, okay? So if you had added or subtracted something and got this answer, probably you'd technically be right, but this is the mathematically professional way to write it. So we're going to write mathematically professional in standard form. This next part is what is probably going to be somewhat new to a lot of people, okay? So the degree, it describes the highest exponent of a polynomial, all right? So the degree, if the degree is 0, that means you don't have an exponent at all. You call that a constant. If the highest exponent is 1, it is a linear. If the highest exponent is 2, it is quadratic. 3 is cubic, 4 is quartic, 5 is quintic, and anything 6 or greater, you say the nth degree, meaning whatever number it is. So like if it was 6, it would be the 6th degree. If the highest exponent was a 52, it would be the 52nd, I guess, degree, 52th. Okay, so maybe I should say 55, 55th degree, but we're not going to have all that. So if I look at this, now, not in order, that's okay. What is my highest exponent? My x squared, okay? So since my highest exponent is x squared, what would I classify that as? Quadratic, okay? All right. Now, just a question. Because it's squared, it's quadratic. How would you classify that by how many terms it has? How many terms does it have? So what would you say? Trinomial. This is a quadratic trinomial. Because on the back, we'll start classifying by degree and term. All right, so I want you to look at this guy. This polynomial I gave you. I'm not going to tell you you're looking for the biggest number, because you're not looking for just the biggest number. You're looking for the highest, the biggest exponent. Good. All right, so look for your highest exponent. What's your highest exponent? That 8 right there, okay? That's your highest exponent. So 8 doesn't have a special name, so what are we going to call it? It's an 8th degree. And this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, doesn't have a special name, polynomial. So we would call that an 8th degree polynomial. All right, so on the back, I gave us some examples. I made us a big chart so that we could practice all the things that we just learned at one time. All right, so I'm looking at number 1 here. My questions are going to be, how many terms do I have? What are the coefficients? What is the constant? What are the factors? And to classify by degree and number of terms. All right, so my advice is usually if it's not already in standard form, I like to put it in standard form. You don't have to put it in standard form to get it right, but I like to. All right, is this already in standard form? Yep, got descending order of exponents. All right, so terms are separated by plus and minus signs. So how many terms am I looking at? 1, 2, 3, because even the constant counts as a term. So I do have 3 terms. All right. If I ask you what are the coefficients, where do we find coefficients? In front of a variable. So I got 2 variables. So what's this coefficient? 12. And then I've got a negative 7. Very good. What is a constant in general? Number without a variable by itself. So do you have a constant?
Yes.
Yep, you got old negative 13 right there. Okay. Now factors are things that are numbers, variables that are getting multiplied together. okay? It doesn't have to mean like big whole parentheses. When you look at 12x squared, what does that technically mean? 12 times x squared. So the 12 and the x squared, those are factors. And if we want to get real technical, what does x squared mean? X times x. So really, if we wanted to be like that, we could be like, well, technically it's 12x and x. But we're not going to be that technical. All right? You have two things multiplied together right here. You have negative 7x, and technically what does that mean? It's negative 7 times x, so those are factors. 13 is not a factor because it's by itself, it's a constant. All right, so those are things that you've had before. Classify the polynomial by degree and number of terms. Number of terms is monomials, binomials, trinomials, polynomial. Degree is all these words right here. Constant, linear, quadratic, cubic, quartic, quintic, and then nth degree. So, tell me how many terms you got. You told me you had 3, so what's that make it? A trinomial. What is your highest exponent?
2.
So what does that make that? Quadratic. You're looking right here at a quadratic trinomial. Typically, you'd use the word for the degree first, and then you say the term. All right, number 2, we got a lot of little examples. I want you to look at number 2, and you got to figure out how many terms there are. How are you going to figure out how many terms there are?
How many are separated?
How many are separated by what? The thing, the plus and minus. All right, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms. Now, I like to put it in standard form. So my highest exponent here is, because technically I would need to make sure that I couldn't add or subtract anything that combine like terms. So my highest exponent is 8c to the 7. And so then I would look for a 6, but I don't have it. I don't have a 5. I do have a 4 plus 10c to the 4. I do have a 3, so plus 4c to the 3rd. I have squared plus 8c squared minus 15c minus 9. Now, you don't have to do that to classify it. I just like to. It kind of helps a lot of students that need to see it in order. So, where am I going to find coefficients? All right, so I've got an 8, a 10, a 4, an 8, and a negative 15. Now, if I did that from the original and went along, I might have them in a different order, but they're all coefficients. Do I have a constant? Yes. Which one is that? Negative 9, the one that doesn't have a variable. All right, you got a lot of terms that have a variable and a number, so you got a lot of factors. So right here, 8c to the 7th, what are my factors? 8 and c to the 7th, and really if we want to be technical, it would be what? 8 and c, but we're not going to be that technical. All right, for 10c to the 4th, it's 10 and c to the 4th. For 4c to the 3rd, what are your factors? 4 and c to the 3rd. All right, 8c squared would be 8 and c to the 2nd. And then negative 15c would be negative 15 and c. Why didn't I write down negative 9? It's a constant. It's not multiplying by anything. All right, then the real most important focus of today is classifying this polynomial by degree and term. Degree is based on the highest exponent. What is your highest exponent?
7.
All right, so 7 doesn't have a special name, so what will we call it? 7th degree. So 7th degree. How many terms you got? A lot. You got more than 3, so we're going to call it a polynomial. So you could have a monomial, binomial, trinomial, or polynomial. Once you get over 3, you just call it a polynomial and you move on about your day. All right, let's look at this next one. Number 3. How many terms we got?
3.
3. 1, 2, 3. What are our coefficients?
8, -9, 2.
Very good. What's our constant?
We don't have one.
We don't have one, so I'm going to put NA. Okay. Technically, I guess we could put 0 because it's not there, but we're not really seeing one, so we could put 0. We could argue either one. On this one, it's not really there, so we're not worried about it. All right. Our factors are the things that are getting multiplied together. So 8 and x to the 5th. Here we got -9 and x to the 3rd. And then we have 12 and, not 12, that's a 2. And x getting multiplied together. So I want you to classify it by degree and term. Degree is based on the highest exponent. What is your highest exponent? 5. Does 5 have a special name?
Yes.
Quintic. All right, so let me write that down. Quintic. And then how many terms did you tell me I had?
3.
And 3 terms is called a
Trinomial.
trinomial. All right. Number 4. How many terms you got?
2.
All right. What are your coefficients?
8.
Just an 8. Very good. That's the only thing that's got a variable. What's your constant?
-3.
-3. Okay. Do you have any factors?
Yes.
Yes, what would that be?
8 and B.
8 and B. That's the only things getting multiplied together. Now, classify this thing by degree. What's your highest exponent? 1. And so 1 is linear. So linear. And you had 2 terms, which makes this a binomial. So you got a linear binomial. All right, so I'm going to put this one in order because when I've had students that maybe didn't like math so much, it helps. Some student maybe struggles a little bit or all those numbers just confuse them. So I'm going to put it in order. Your highest exponent is 7. So I'm going to do 9z to the 7th minus 7z to the 3rd plus 6z. Now you absolutely do not have to put it in order. If it helps you, do it. If you don't need to, don't do it. How many terms you got in number 5?
3.
3. What's your coefficients?
9, -7, 6.
Very good. What's your constant?
None.
None. You don't have one. So I guess, we really probably should do what my friend said and put 0. So let me put 0 right here. Because if it's not there, it's technically 0. Okay? We just don't have, and so know that we just don't have one there. All right, so my factors, things that are multiplied together, that would be 9 and z to the 7 are multiplied together. -7 and z to the 3rd are multiplied together. And 6 and z are multiplied together. Classifying by degree, you look at your highest exponent. What is your highest exponent?
7.
So what's its name? 7th degree. And how many terms do we have? So that makes this a trinomial. 7th degree trinomial. All right, number 6. How many terms you got?
4.
All right. What's the coefficient?
15.
15, -12, and 1.
How do you know it's a coefficient or not?
If it's in front of the variable.
If it's in front of the variable. How'd you know that was a 1 and not a 0?
Because it's 0.
Why can't it be a 0? Very good. If it was a 0 and you did 0 times r, what would it have? 0. It wouldn't be there. If you see it, it's a 1. You've got an r, so you've got 1 r. All right, now what is your constant this time? -4. All right, so we got to classify this thing by degree and polynomial. Degree is based on the highest exponent. So what's my highest exponent? 6. So how would I say that? 6th degree. And I've got 4 terms, which makes this a polynomial. I like totally
Is
polynomial.
4 and up polynomial?
Yes, 4 and up is polynomial. And then I totally skipped over the factors here. Your factors are 15 and r to the 6th and -12 and r to the 4th technically 1 and r there. All right. I think you've got the handle on the factors thing. So for the sake of time, I'm going to be bad and I'm going to skip this. I know. I just got to get it written down. All right. So most important thing here. How many terms have I got right here? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Man. All right. My coefficients. I got a lot of coefficients. What are my coefficients? There we go. So I got a 1, I got a 2, I got a -7, I got a 2, I got a -1, I got a 3. Now I list them in a different order and it's okay. All right. Do we have a constant? 9. Very good. On the next one. All right. So now, I guess I should write these out. 1 and y to the 6th. 2 and y to the 5th. -7 and y to the 4th. 2 and y to the 3rd. -1 and y squared. And then 3 and y. All right. So, degree is based on exponent. What is your highest exponent here? So that makes this a 6th degree polynomial. Why polynomial? There's more than 4. There's 7 terms. There's a bunch of them. All right, now here's what I'm going to try to do. I'm not going to do this part. We're going to try to classify these next few without doing everything that led up to it. So if I ask you to classify by degree, what am I asking you to look at? The highest exponent. So, what is my highest exponent here? 4. All right, so if the highest degree, the degree is 4, that is quartic. Okay, so I've got a quartic. The term is based on how many terms I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what do we call that? Polynomial. The nomial, whatever that is by term. The other thing in the front is by the degree. All right, now, if I classify by degree here, this one gets a little tricky. Degree is based on highest exponent. Do I have an exponent?
No.
So technically my highest exponent is
0.
0 because I don't see it. Because that's a constant. So you would tell me this is a constant. And how many terms is that? So it's a constant monomial. And let's be real. If you have a constant, you only have the one thing. So it's always going to be constant monomial. All right. So then my last example for right now. I need you to classify by degree. So if I ask you by degree, where do you look?
Exponent.
Exponent. So when I look at my exponent, will I use 2, 1, or 8?
8.
Why?
Is the highest.
It's the highest. So 8 doesn't have a special name, so I'll call it an 8th degree. All right, so an 8th degree. And it had 1, 2, 3 terms. So what's that mean?
Trinomial.
Trinomial. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a second. Now, if you already went ahead and did these, then that's great. And I will throw up my answer key right there for you to zoom in and check. I do need to change these two right there to make them be 0 because I like calling them 0 better, call them what they really are. So I'm going to freeze that there for just a smidge for you. All right, so look right here. Now, everybody's looking. We didn't get the whiteboards out today, and that's okay. All right? If I'm going to classify by degree, and you could use your notes if you need to. If you're, oh, thank you, baby.
Do we have that?
If you're, no, this is just something I normally would put on the board, but I just printed it today. All right? If your highest exponent is a 0, what do you call it?
Constant.
Constant. If your highest exponent is 1,
Linear.
that's linear. What about 2?
Quadratic.
All right. Now, you should be used to those. What is 3?
Cubic.
Cubic. You remember that because like when you have volume and you have inches cubed. All right. 4 is what?
Quartic.
Quartic. What is 5?
Quintic.
Quintic. And then anything over 6 and over would be like the nth degree, okay? So these are the words that we would be using. Oh, my G did not work right. Now, as far as terms go, if you see one term, what do you say? Monomial. If you see two terms,
Binomial.
and spelling's hard, and three terms,
Trinomial.
okay? Anything 4 or over.
Polynomial.
All right. So if I ask you to classify by degree, I want you to give me the degree first and then the term, the polynomial nomial part. All right. Yes, Rick.
I don't think me and Bang have that thing.
Oh, nobody does. It's just something I printed out. All right. So here's what you're going to do. I want you to look at this one. Okay? So you're just looking in your head. Don't tell me yet, because if you answer, everybody else stops thinking. Okay? So I want you to be able to classify it by degree and number of terms. If you need to look at your notes, I'm okay with that. All right. Who thinks they know how to classify by degree? All right, you were first.
Quadratic polynomial.
All right. So she says quadratic polynomial. Do we lovingly agree or disagree?
Disagree.
I sort of. What do we disagree with? It is a polynomial. It's 4 or more. The quadratic part. Because x squared is not our highest. X to the 4th is our highest. So if it's 4th, what is it really? A quartic polynomial. Okay? All right. Now, take a look at this one. All right. My friend wants to tell me about there. What you say? Now listen carefully to him. He says cubic trinomial. Do we lovingly agree or disagree?
Agree.
What makes it cubic?
The 3.
X to the 3rd is the highest power. What makes it a trinomial? Because there's 3 terms. Okay? All right? Now, don't get freaked out by that. You can have a fractional or a decimal, what's that thing called in the front? Coefficient. All right, so look at that one. You're thinking. Don't say it out loud, because when you say it out loud, everybody else stops thinking. All right, my friend, you tell me what you think it is. So she says constant binomial. Do we lovingly agree or disagree?
Disagree.
Disagree.
Say, do we fully disagree or only part?
Part.
Part. What do we agree with?
Uh,
It is a binomial. Why? Because it's 2. Why is it linear, my friend? There's x to the 1st power. Very good. Very good. All right, let's look at this guy. Now, don't tell me out loud, because everybody needs a chance to think. So you're trying to classify by degree, which is your highest exponent, and number of terms. All right, who wants to tell me? All right, my friend, you tell me.
Quadratic trinomial.
All right, my friend says quadratic trinomial. Do we lovingly agree or disagree?
agree.
All right. Why is it a trinomial?
Because there's 3 terms.
Why is it quadratic?
Because 2 is the highest.
2 is the highest exponent. Does that 12 have anything to do with it?
No.
Nope, we're only looking at exponents and numbers of terms. All right. Let's look at this guy. Now, don't tell me yet. Everybody's got a chance to think. All right. Somebody who hasn't told me out loud, wants to tell me. Don't be scared. All right, my friend back there, you tell me. He says, which one? Quintic binomial. Do we lovingly agree with quintic binomial, or do we lovingly disagree?
Agree.
Agree. What makes it quintic?
The 5.
The 5 is the highest exponent. And what makes it a binomial? There's 2 terms. All right, one more. Now, what you can't get in the habit of is just looking at the first. Because I kind of did us wrong. I put them in order. So you just been probably looking at the first. Don't always just look at the first, because I should have been mean and moved them around. All right. Anybody who hadn't said it want to try it? Can y'all see it? Is I got too low? All right, my friend back there, tell me what you think. 9th degree polynomial. All right. Do we lovingly agree with 9th degree polynomial, or lovingly disagree? Agree. What makes it a polynomial?
There's more than 3 terms.
There's more than 3. There's 4 or more. Okay. There's a lot of them. kind of once you see that there's a bunch of them, you're like, polynomial. Why do we say it's a 9th degree instead of maybe like the 8th degree? That's the biggest coefficient.
Because it's not an exponent.
Very good. We're only looking at exponents. Very, very good, my friends. So, the main thing that I need you to take away from today that was new to you was this classifying. You do have to memorize these words. You're not going to have a word bank or anything, okay?